Although in this process, consciousness has restructured itself around knowledge of something unlimited, universal, the knowledge itself is still limited.
I see. And so we had described it as a void.
After emptying out its egoic center, consciousness is confronted with something of a void. To say it's a void is to say that it's something which it cannot make commensurate with respect to its previous knowledge. And so in this way, consciousness can move into the void up to a certain point. Can gain as much knowledge as possible.
I see. You're saying consciousness can construct information around the void up to a certain point.
Up to a certain point. In its exhausting its capacity to make sense of the void in relationship to its own particular knowledge, when it has come upon that limit, some mysterious way, the void is revealed as the sacred ground of being. In the same way that consciousness was able to go deeper into itself in an egoic condition, also it's able to go deeper into itself in a unitive condition. This can happen.
Like it accesses the potentiality, which means power. I see. Now we're speaking of an activity of consciousness which does not take place in time. This is what's been said. Okay.
Well, one has to be rather careful with this. If one wants to go into it, one has to go into the question of what is insight.
The ending of the unitive state, as it were. Okay. And then experientially and insightfully. Okay. And then you said there was a further question.
I think there's a further question, which is it possible for consciousness to be totally aware of its own content? Not bit by bit, stage by stage, but can consciousness become totally aware of itself?
So you told me you had something that you wanted to talk about.
Well, last time we were talking over the question of consciousness. The mechanism of consciousness.
Its relationship to time.
Its structure in this way.
I think we had also gotten to describing some steps and its emptying out. And we had spoken about a unitive state of consciousness.
We came to a point in describing consciousness's capacity for knowledge where we said consciousness, through its power of distinction, has the capacity to not only have knowledge of particular things, chairs, tables, men, women, etc., but also universal things. Because consciousness, we've said, has a sensitivity to its own existence. And having a sensitivity to its own existence, it has intrinsic knowledge of itself, knowledge of its own being, its own life, and its own existence. And as consciousness moves deeper into the experience of itself, moves deeper into the knowledge of itself, it's able to recognize that these qualities of existence, life, being are basically shared. That the quality of the being of this and the being of that share the same quality of being.
And I think I added a caveat that when abstracted from the particulars, it would be a general. But once all of the particular content would be emptied out, then perhaps tentatively one could say this would be universal content. I didn't want to make the jump from particular to universal quite yet. But that caveat standing, universal content.
First, in its capacity for distinction, noticing what is shared across the particulars, and so having knowledge of the general, and deepening its knowledge of the general, and therefore negating its knowledge of the particular, which is itself, coming to a point where consciousness empties out its own egoic center. Such that the being, life, and existence that consciousness distinguishes in being sensitive to itself are no longer peculiar to itself.
Like particular?
And so emptying out its egoic center and then deepening its investigation of itself, we've said consciousness comes upon a unitive center, where the being that consciousness distinguishes in itself is also the being that is distinguished in all other things.
Distinction made in terms, less and less in terms of separation and division, but more, not more, but simply in terms of relationship.
Yes. Distinction that no more necessarily implies exclusion.
Right. Like division or separation may imply relationship, but relationship might not necessarily imply division or separation.
Quite right.
And you wanted to move further into this question.
Although in this process, consciousness has restructured itself around knowledge of something unlimited, universal, the knowledge itself is still limited.
I see. And so we had described it as a void.
After emptying out its egoic center, consciousness is confronted with something of a void. To say it's a void is to say that it's something which it cannot make commensurate with respect to its previous knowledge. It's something that consciousness can't make sense of. It's something that consciousness cannot understand. Because consciousness has always been understanding the world in terms of itself, and understanding itself in terms of its own particular existence, particular being, and particular life in the form of knowledge. And so, once that content, once that knowledge, once those experiences are emptied out, it's confronted with something it can't understand. And it's only through moving into that thing, penetrating into that thing, and in this way, restructuring the old knowledge around a new center, that it's able to come upon the universal. Because the universal cannot be understood in terms of the particular.
I see. So you're saying there must be a transformation of the particular. Restructured. Do you think transformation is forward? And the new thing, the new ground that this restructuring is taking place upon isn't a void? Unknown, mysterious.
Consciousness may move into this void through experience by sustaining it as the focus of conscious attention. Because as consciousness maintains consciousness of the void, it becomes more conscious of it. Because being conscious of it over a period of time, it's able to distinguish it in some respect and therefore gain a certain limited knowledge of that thing. And so in this way, moving deeper, slowly, slowly. If I'm faced with something I don't understand and I give my attention to it, in giving my attention to it, I find various ways to make it relevant to myself. And if this thing that I'm faced with is something that I have not faced before, in making it relevant to myself, I'm restructuring the old knowledge, recontextualizing the old knowledge in terms of the new knowledge.
New experiences.
And so in this way, consciousness can move into the void up to a certain point. Can gain as much knowledge as possible.
I see. You're saying consciousness can construct information around the void up to a certain point.
Up to a certain point.
I see. That would mean like consciousness wouldn't be able to encompass it fully. With its knowledge of it, that is.
Mm-hmm. And so when consciousness has proceeded into the void as far as it is able to, mysteriously, the void is then revealed as the sacred ground of being. In its exhausting its capacity to make sense of the void in relationship to its own particular knowledge, when it has come upon that limit, some mysterious way, the void is revealed as the sacred ground of being. So thought says outside agency, God, etc., etc.
Or inside agency, Atman.
But the void can also be penetrated through insight. Not having to go through all of these steps. Not having to make this journey through time. But rather, faced with this thing I basically don't understand, because it's incommensurate with my past knowledge, understanding the limits of my knowledge and coming to terms with this thing, and so observing without purpose, without direction, without motive, and from that very observation, insight into the new center around which consciousness is then structured.
I see. And in that there would be no labeling of it in terms of the old knowledge. Because it's not taking place in time. Or if there is a labeling of it, it sees it and understands it. And says, oh no, it's not quite that, buddy. Like names might be necessary, placeholders. tools with which we can call something forward.
Structurally, mechanically, there's a relationship between the old knowledge structure and the new knowledge. Because they both exist in relationship to the same mechanism, although functioning in slightly different way.
Slightly different.
In its egoic condition.
But similar.
Quite similar.
Similar, yeah, but slightly different. I like that, yeah.
In the egoic condition, consciousness is sensitive to itself in an exclusionary sense, in a particular sense.
In the egoic condition?
Consciousness is sensitive to its own existence apart from other things. But in the unitive condition, consciousness is sensitive to its own existence in its relationship to not only other things, but
like things as they are. That might be saying too much.
Sensitive not only to the existence of things, but to that quality of universal and sacred existence
It's a little flowery. Yes. I see, we share the concern. It sounds very kumbaya.
Not sensitive only to the existence of things, but sensitive to that quality of existence that allows things to exist, contextualizes things, and allows things to be intelligible, and allows things to be understood.
Like very simply put, a relationship. The quality of a relationship. Why might we call it sacred? Part of the remarkable thing was that you had pointed out the consciousness's ability to recognize that which does not change in time, with reference to what does change in time. But I wonder if it's enough to say that. Therefore, it's seen as sacred. One might come along and say, what you're speaking about is very mundane.
Sacred in the sense?
It's just the background. You say, we can observe the stars, and throughout millennia we see they've moved further, closer, exploded, new galaxies. And now you're saying, because of these changes, we can recognize the space that they're in. Something like this. Maybe a poor analogy, but and it says, no, it's just the space in which the stars exist. What about it is sacred?
Not only the space in which the stars exist, but the space that supports the existence of the stars and allows the stars to be understood, allows oneself to have a relationship with the stars, and also the space in which the stars exist.
And also allows the stars to have a relationship to each other.
Which
is how we see that they've changed locations with respect to our observations.
I spoke of it earlier as the sacred ground of being, because It's the ground of all meaning. It's the ground of all significance.
I see. And we also iterated that any of this would only make sense to one who has gone into this question somewhat.
A little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Quite a remarkable thing takes place within the unitive state of consciousness, because although consciousness is a limited mechanical process, in its very existence, it has a relationship to what is not limited and not mechanical. Because it's able to distinguish, to identify the simple quality of being, existence, and life that it has within itself. No longer particularly, but universally.
I see, but consciousness would only be able to recognize its relationship to the non-mechanical once it understands its own mechanism. So there's a puzzle there.
It's rather tricky here, and one has to be fairly careful, because it's important to keep in mind that consciousness's experience of that is not that. Consciousness's knowledge of that is not that. Consciousness's...
I see, of the unitive state? I see.
Consciousness's experience of being is not being, it's merely consciousness's experience. It's merely its knowledge. And so...
I see. Once consciousness analyzes its own unitive state, what might end up happening is it starts abstracting from the particulars once again. And then all it can really amount to is the generals. And then so it loses sight of that universal content once more. At least in its analysis.
Or confuses the nature of the content that it has available to it for recognition. What consciousness recognizes of itself, it's only its knowledge of itself. It's only its experience of itself.
I see what you mean.
But its experience of itself, its knowledge of itself, does not exhaust itself.
Right. It thinks it's recognizing new information. But there's a sleight of hand there, is what you're saying. It's how could it be new if it's recognized?
When I say that consciousness being mechanical, being limited,
yes, sir.
Despite that fact, in the unitive state has a relationship to what is not mechanical, to what is not limited, that does not take place within the context of consciousness's experience, but within the context of the very mechanism of the thing itself.
Yeah, I see.
So going on from there, if anything has been communicated at all, we can go on to discuss the further developments in consciousness. Because I was saying that although consciousness has knowledge of something unlimited, that knowledge is still limited. And so being limited, there is an opportunity for developments in that knowledge.
So consciousness has not exhausted itself yet.
In the same way that consciousness was able to go deeper into itself in an egoic condition, also it's able to go deeper into itself in a unitive condition. This can happen.
Like it accesses the potentiality, which means power.
In much a similar way to our discussion of the egoic state, consciousness can move deeper into itself through a process of experience. If consciousness is aware of itself in daily life, especially if within that consciousness there's no choice, the central content of consciousness becomes increasingly more and more relevant. And as the central content becomes more relevant, the peripheral content becomes less relevant. Because the central content is universal, whereas the peripheral content is only particular.
I see.
And so, in this way...
By central content, we mean essential knowledge, like directly produced by its self-reflexivity.
Center here does not imply a point within the space of experience.
Oh.
Not a localized center, but rather a delocalized center. Central in the sense, that's what it's structured around.
That's a tough one. I think that's a tough one.
This discussion can only have significance if one has come into that unitive condition.
Delocalized center. Localized.
Otherwise, I think it sounds like a bunch of...
No. Delocalized center. I think it makes sense. Yeah, so essential. I was saying essential knowledge directly produced by the self-reflexivity of consciousness.
In this way, in living its life, in living a life that is increasingly less centered upon its own particular existence, consciousness is slowly, imperceptibly emptying out the peripheral content.
One of the ways that might happen is one might see that what is central and what is peripheral content isn't like a matter of thought. I think one might be tempted to make judgments about this is peripheral content, this is central content, essential content, but it doesn't come across that way, at least. I don't think so. I don't know if I should qualify it more than that, but that's not how it comes about.
Thought can construct a center within experience. Thought can say, I'm over here, that's over there.
This is the localizing.
Localized center. But quite a different thing from the existential center of consciousness.
Yes, sir. Okay, and you were saying we can move into this center experientially, or... Oh, sorry.
One can also penetrate into the center through insight. But consciousness, looking into itself, into its center, and not taking time in that observation.
Yes, it needs to make time.
Not taking time.
Oh, I see.
If consciousness looks within itself and has a demand to investigate it into itself further, and doesn't take time in the context of that inquiry, because time is limited, time is a movement of the past, etc., then consciousness can penetrate deeper into itself through insight.
I see. Now we're speaking of an activity of consciousness which does not take place in time. This is what's been said. Okay.
Well, one has to be rather careful with this. If one wants to go into it, one has to go into the question of what is insight. Insight is not knowledge. Insight is not a responsive memory.
I see. It's not a response of memory.
Insight is not put together by thought.
That one's harder for me to nod to. Because I feel like I don't know if something's been communicated.
Who's nodding?
What is the thing that's acknowledging that insight is not thought?
Quiet.
Or yes. No, yes.
Insight is not an experience. Basically implied in all of this, insight is not a movement in time. So insight is not a conscious process.
Like, do you mean we don't do it consciously? Do you mean it's not part of the mechanism of consciousness? Is that true? Okay.
Consciousness is not responsible for insight.
I see. So, technically speaking, it was incorrect for me to say that. We're speaking of an activity of consciousness which takes place outside of time. So it wouldn't be an activity of consciousness per se, is what you're saying. Okay.
That's quite right.
Okay.
Consciousness is temporally extended, mechanical, material.
Finite, somatic, yes.
Insight doesn't take place in time.
Okay, so
it's not a material process.
Is activity okay then? Is it an activity?
Insight?
Yes, sir. Is it a movement? Time, move means time. What is it? What is insight? Well, does insight take place? Happens in space?
Insight might take place in relationship to various activities, in relationship to certain forms of experience, certain content of interest. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But to speak of insight as an activity or a movement, perhaps a little bit deceptive. Insight takes place when there's observation with no purpose, no direction, no motive. Consciousness does not bring about that insight. Consciousness just prepares the ground. Consciousness says, I'm interested in this. I want to find out what it is. I don't have the capacity to find out what it is in the way that I'm interested, which is not to take time.
Which means it doesn't wait either, because waiting means time. I see.
So in this way, consciousness can move deeper into itself. Or be moved?
I see, we were thinking along the same plot. I was thinking maybe with experience, it can move further into itself. Maybe it is moved further into itself by insight. But now we spoke of the danger of outside agency, stuff like this.
In this, there is a deepening of consciousness within itself.
As a fact.
As a fact.
It's unbelievable. Unbelievable.
So in this way, either immediately or gradually and perceptibly,
I see, via insight, via experience, conscious, mechanical process. Is it inevitable? This deepening? Let's say insight does not take place for whatever reason. Then experience is a mechanical, conscious process. Is it necessary? I see. This is...
Probably, if one lives ordinary existence, engaged with the society, it has a certain natural inevitability.
Like one wouldn't just be hanging out, as it were, in the unitive state. Like just chilling.
Yeah. Because the conditions need to be met where the peripheral content is rendered irrelevant. Such that the peripheral content is inadequate to meet the demands of daily life. And if these conditions are met, naturally there is a deepening of consciousness into itself. But it may take a great deal of time.
I see.
Many, many years.
I see.
But as it is, I think it's a fairly natural process.
I mean, one has supposedly come across the sacred ground of being. There's great energy in that.
Mm-hmm.
Greatly motivating, productive, economical even.
Mm-hmm. Because the fact is that the peripheral content, which is knowledge, particular knowledge, is inadequate to meet the demands of daily life.
Yeah, I see. So, like, necessity might be an aptly applied there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, necessary for this movement to occur.
Mm-hmm.
That is consciousness moving deeper into its center. Okay, so it can happen experientially or insightfully.
Driven by insight.
What have we said?
So in this way, consciousness's essential content becomes more and more comprehensive. More and more all-constitutive.
More actual.
Probably not. Don't want to put it that way.
Oh, no?
Not that the central content becomes more actual, because the central content is actual. It has this universal quality.
But the building around becomes more actual.
Yes.
Or no. I see. Well, the building around as well.
Proportionally, consciousness becomes more actual.
Yeah. Because it's becoming more attuned to the actual.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so the things that it's concerned about become more actual as the particular becomes negated.
Mm-hmm. 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 So in this way, consciousness is emptying out its content. Emptying out its content as its own essential content becomes more comprehensive, more and more all-constitutive, such that more and more of consciousness's experience becomes its experience of the ground. Such that at the last moment of conscious experience, all of consciousness's experience are an experience of its own being, life, and existence.
I see. Now, you're describing, when you say the last moment, you're saying, like we're at the end of the assembly line?
Consciousness is limited, temporary, mechanical, somatic function. So, its capacity to distinguish being, to distinguish life, distinguish existence, its capacity to have knowledge of that is limited.
We're right at the line between the center and the knowledge of the center. Right.
And so moving deeper into itself, consciousness can come to a point where it has all but exhausted its own capacity to know itself.
Yes, yeah. I see, which comes from the observing and the emptying.
Mm-hmm.
I see. So the last moment is like...
all of its experience is an experience of that, except for its own awareness of it.
Okay.
When consciousness has exhausted its own capacity, after that capacity, that energy has been exhausted, it comes to an end. It's like a candle that has burned away all its fuel.
In terms of consciousness discussed here, what could we provide a description of the last bit of the candle wax? But you're saying after all the wax is gone, the candle is gone. Mm-hmm. This is completely logical, completely reasonable, very easy to understand. Comes across as a silly question, but how does one know that all the wax is gone? You see no candle, you say no candle. Fairly simple. But if you've been burning the candle for a long time, and every day you come back and there's a little bit of wax left, a little bit of wax left, a little bit of wax left.
To go into this question in depth, I think should be the topic of our next discussion. Because basically your question is, if I can put it differently,
Yes, please.
if I'm not misunderstanding you,
Yes,
concerns the significance of life beyond consciousness and the distinction between that and the conscious condition.
Yes. I see. You're saying this might be better put for next time.
But one's most intimate experiences, one's most fundamental knowledge has come to an end. And one can identify that in various ways. It has various implications for one's whole way of experiencing and being in the world, which one can go into.
Okay.
I think before proceeding, though, it might be worth pursuing a question, in case there's anybody who can pick it up.
Just for my own sake.
Yes.
So far we've talked about, continuing from the last episode, consciousness's basic workings, its relationship to time. Using those descriptions, we developed a description of the egoic state of consciousness, and a transition from the egoic state to the unitive state. And then we had just also discussed the ending of the unitive state, as it were. Okay. And then experientially and insightfully. Okay. And then you said there was a further question.
I think there's a further question, which is it possible for consciousness to be totally aware of its own content? Not bit by bit, stage by stage, but can consciousness become totally aware of itself?
Yes.
We'll go into it a little bit. Which means what? Is there, or is it possible for there to be total insight into the whole content of consciousness?
It's a thrilling prospect. It wouldn't be step by step, because logically speaking, that would mean time. So it would mean looking forward or looking back. One could iterate the steps, but this would involve time. And so not that. And then but the question is, can consciousness totally
become totally aware of itself? Total insight into the whole content of consciousness implies not an insight into a particular moment of consciousness. Not an insight into a particular function of consciousness.
You're unpacking total here. Oh, and consciousness, of course. It might be useful to develop the sense of totalities. Not as a step.
But can there be an insight into the whole nature, structure, and content of consciousness?
Instantaneously.
Immediately.
Immediately.
Upon the instant.
I see. I see why you prefaced with, for anyone who could pick it up. This is. I was given a warning recently about meta language, but this is nonsense. A notice, not a warning. A notice. But it isn't. I mean, it isn't. It isn't nonsense. I don't want to simply say it is. Well, it also isn't sense. It's not a. Sense implies measurement, memory, and then thought and time, the mechanical process of it all. Strictly speaking, it is nonsense, but not in the colloquial sense.
Personally, I was never able to do this. I don't think I ever really considered the possibility. But
I see. Personally, you were never for consciousness to be totally aware of
itself. Its whole content.
One couldn't. I don't think one could consider it personally.
Perhaps not.
I think this is almost out of the question. It might be necessary. It might be a necessary step. But dear Lord, there's so much trouble in it. I say step. This is.
If consciousness is totally aware of itself, immediately it's emptied out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In the very becoming totally aware of itself, it's emptying itself out of the totality of its content. And so in the very moment that consciousness becomes totally aware of itself, it ceases.
Right. That very consciousness, which, may I say understands itself totally.
I think be aware.
Be aware. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because although consciousness is totally aware of itself, may not, probably cannot fully understand its own mechanism.
I see. It would have to stand outside of itself somehow, as it were, for it to understand itself. I see. Awareness.
But in becoming totally aware of itself through insight, aware of its own content,
like that very consciousness, which is aware, totally aware of itself, like ends itself.
The very awareness of itself negates itself.
And then you have I see, and then when I say and then you have the you, there's like universal. But this is speculative, somewhat.
I see what you're saying.
Oh yeah, you do. Right.
Such that I don't know if we want to go into this, but the way in which consciousness comes to an end has bearing upon the condition that will be encountered upon the cessation of consciousness.
Yes. But with respect to the notice I was speaking about earlier, I've been told recently that one might not being a very good boy to speak of what comes after, as it were, the total cessation of consciousness, until it has happened.
Next time, I think we should go on to talk about this question.
Like eating cookies before dinner.
Yeah. But at least to keep some sort of structural order, we talk about it next time.
Talk about what? What are we talking about? What are we talking about next time? If you could put it together a little bit. Yeah.
Next time we should discuss the nature of what remains after the cessation of consciousness.
Oh, I see.
We should discuss the nature of the experiencing there.
Yeah. We said consciousness is a particular way of knowing, being, experiencing. And you're saying what we could speak of non-particular way of experiencing. You say the experiencing present there. It's like, I thought with consciousness, all experiencing would have thrown out the window.
Experiencing meaning the activity of the senses.
Okay. I see.
The capacity for distinction.
Once, like, what remains after the consciousness, which functions over and above the senses.
Put it again?
What happens after the consciousness, which operates over and above the senses?
Comes to an end.
Comes to an end.
Yes.
Like what remains?
Yes.
I see. And then you're saying we could reasonably, sensibly use the word experiencing here as well.
I think so.
Okay.
On this discussion, there are a few other ways for consciousness to come to an end that I don't want to discuss now. I think it's perhaps something to circle back to at a later time. I think the ways outlined...
Don't look at me.
I think the ways outlined here are perhaps the most simple. Simple such that they require no particular technique, no particular practice, no particular regimented form of inquiry.
Ground up, kind of. Ground up.
But there are other ways that involve observation of consciousness's various contents, which we can go into.
I see, with some more focus. But you're saying there's some finesse to the observation. There's some finesse to the focus. Like knowing what content to watch might be. Might be a skill.
Various traditional approaches. The religions have said, in various ways, according to their own traditions, that there is a way that man can come into communion with truth. Not in the form of knowledge, in the form of experience, but man can come into communion with truth itself. Truth which exists beyond all experience, all time. And if there is an ability to establish this communion, in that communion there may be the emptying out of consciousness and all of its content. Perhaps also something we could discuss at a later date if there's interest in such things.
Like we're speaking of a tradition which does not serve itself.
Could you say a little bit more?
Like part of the emptying out via communion would involve emptying out experiential knowledge of the tradition.
Quite.
And so in this way, the tradition doesn't serve itself, as opposed to traditions that might serve itself might be like governmental institutions. One might
You're saying that if there is truth to the religions of the world, essentially they cannot be self-centered.
Yeah. Me and my tradition has the truth. This cannot be the essential stance of
who will accept it?
Of any religion. Who will accept
Who
it?
will accept it?
I don't know. I think it's fairly simple. We're saying truth can't be a matter of I'm right, you're wrong. I don't know if there's anything to accept. I don't think that's how you ask the question, but where's the acceptance?